Nothing quite like getting out there and enjoying a nice day on the lake with the family, but as we already know, things can turn quickly out there, and what you thought was going to be a nice day on the lake can quickly turn into a nice day in the lake, just like some of the things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the coast of Barcelona, where the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Symphony of the Seas had just departed when all of a sudden a man overboard alarm was sounded. Crews from the Symphony of the Seas quickly launched rescue vessels and went back to conduct a search for the missing passenger. Fortunately, they were able to recover the person approximately an hour after the call was issued. A very fortunate situation. Captain came over the intercom and announced this shortly after the rescue was completed.
Earlier, we were advised that someone had gone into the water, so we stopped the ship. We did launch a rescue boat. We let out some life rings, and we did recover one person from the water this evening. So there was one person that went overboard on the Symphony of the Seas, and at the moment has been recovered.
And speaking of great recoveries, that's going to bring us to our next story, which is going to take us down to Florida, where this was the scene just a few days ago, when the U.S. Coast Guard Air Station Clearwater crews received an alert from Miami Air Route Traffic Control Center saying that somebody had spotted what appeared to be a disabled vessel approximately 100 miles off the Dry Tortugas. The U.S. Coast Guard Air Station Clearwater team quickly launched one of their rescue helicopters to go out in an attempt to try and find the vessel. Upon arriving on the vessel, the Coast Guard crew launched their rescue swimmer into the water. As he approached the ship, he did notice that the vessel had become disabled, but also the crew member on board had suffered an arm injury during the incident. The Coast Guard crews quickly jumped into action, getting the sailor into the water and using the helicopter to hoist the man up to safety. The sailor was then taken to the Lower Keys Medical Facility, where he is expected to make a full recovery from his arm injury. The sailor is also working with local authorities on trying to recover the vessel. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Texas, where this was the scene this past weekend when the U.S. Coast Guard Station Galveston actually received a phone call from the operator of a 21-foot cuddy cabin vessel stating that his vessel had become disabled and they had run aground on the North Jetty. The Galveston Watchstander Station launched one of their 45-foot response boats to the scene, and Air Station Houston quickly put one of their MH-65 Dolphin helicopters in the air to head that direction as well. Once both crews arrived upon the scene, the situation was assessed and it was quickly determined that the helicopter crew probably had the highest likelihood of success of rescuing the two boaters who were stuck on the jetty, as 4-foot seas and 20-mile-per-hour winds hindered the rescue vessel from being able to get close enough to the scene to be able to pull the boaters safely from the jetty. The helicopter quickly dropped one of its baskets with its rescue swimmer down to the vessel. They individually pulled the two boaters safely from the boat back to the helicopter. The two boaters were then transported by the Coast Guard crew over to the airport in Galveston. The boaters are currently working with local authorities to try and arrange salvage of the vessel off the jetty. The local Coast Guard crews like to remind boaters before you go out, consider tidal conditions and try and familiarize yourself with any possible hazards in the vicinity before heading out boating. Our next story to make the boating news this week is actually going to hover around an incident that occurred 2 years ago off the coast of Japan, when the Maersk container ship Eindhoven was traversing off the coast when all of a sudden it lost propulsion from one of its engines, causing the vessel to list and wound up losing several containers overboard. Well, it appears now that approximately 58 of those containers belong to the retail giant Target, and according to the newest lawsuit filing by Target's insurers, they were never compensated by Maersk for the 58 containers that never were received. The lawsuit being launched against Maersk claims that Target is owed approximately $5.8 million for the contents of those containers, but this really just highlights how bad of a couple years the shipping industry had on loss of containers. In 2020, over 4,000 boxes went missing, and in 2021, almost 2,000 boxes went missing as well. A lot of this probably stems from the complications the shipping industry went through during the whole COVID pandemic period of 2020 and 21. But one thing's for sure, this is probably just the first of many lawsuits we're going to see to come. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here. And if you haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button.